Hello, everyone. This is Ron Bush with Ron Bush Consulting, and you're listening to the Information Playground. Learn how to become safer in a world that grows more dangerous each and every day through common sense behavior, best practices, and education. The Information Playground is dedicated to helping you stay informed about changes in technology and especially issues of cybersecurity. 3 to 4 companies a day on average report a data breach in America. It's estimated that over 10 per day are actually breached, and some know it and try to hide it. Others have no idea they've been breached. The average data breach runs into the millions of dollars, and for the small to mid-sized business, that means bankruptcy or dissolution 64% of the time. The average breach isn't discovered for 5 to 7 months, according to the Ponemon organization, and 66% of data breaches took months, some even years to discover. Every 2 seconds, another American becomes a victim of identity theft or fraud, according to LifeLock. So technology is for everyone to enjoy, but with power comes responsibility. Join us on Mondays from 8 to 9 and Fridays from 1 p.m. Central Time on WVLP.org. If you're in Northwest Indiana, that's 103.1 FM. Or if you prefer on demand, you can catch the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcast, and several others. You can also catch the video version of the Information Playground on YouTube, and of course, all of that's under the channel name, The Information Playground. So don't just sit passively by and be the victim. Start now to protect yourself. This show is underwritten by Ron Bush Consulting. You can visit our website at ronbushconsulting.com. And now, let's welcome our guest. Alexander Fleiss, good morning to you, or good afternoon, I suppose it is, and welcome.
Well, thank you for having me on today, Ron. Really appreciate it.
Well, it's a pleasure. I guess let's start. Would you tell the folks a little bit about yourself, who you are, basically, how you came to do what you do?
Of course. Well, Ron, I've had a career that spans about 25 years now in engineering and artificial intelligence. I got started actually working on video games in the mid-90s, including working on the movie version of Flight of the Intruder, the Vietnam piece with Denzel Washington and Willem Dafoe. And it was basic graphics back then, a few levels. But around 99, I started getting very excited by machine learning. Now, everyone knows artificial intelligence. They think, the Terminator, war games, HAL from 2001's A Space Odyssey. But in fact, the most prevalent form of AI on planet Earth is in fact the dishwasher, a machine that can take a set of intelligent instructions and follow them repeatedly without failure. And that's all that requires a machine to be AI. It's just a little bit of intelligence. So really just a touch and you're there. And with the dishwasher, it can rinse, send in the soap when it needs to, and provide the functions to clean your clothing. Now, machine learning is the branch of AI preoccupied with learning. So it's software code that will change how it functions based on what it's working on. So the data set it's dealing with, whether it's facial recognition or speech recognition, or for what we do, economic predictions. Machine learning will take in the new data and will vary its assessment of the environment. And so I love to talk about Australia and China. In 1990, Australia had about 5% of its exports to China, and today it's hitting almost half. So Australia has basically become a vendor to China. But the point is that over this 30-year span, the machine learning views the entity of Australia as a very different creature with very different correlations than it did 30 years ago. The way Apple Computer is nothing like it was in 1990, 1995. To compare, the two entities is completely an apples and oranges endeavor. There's nothing in common. So, machine learning is a real, sweet way to deal with, ever-changing data sets, which, of course, the financial markets are. And not just one ever-changing data set, but you've got, we monitor 54 countries. So you've got a lot of data sets that are changing all the time. And not just are they changing, but their relationships with one another are changing, and sometimes quite dramatically.
That's it's amazing. While you were talking, I was thinking um, the George Santayana quote: "Those who do not know their history are doomed to repeat it." Um,
Mm.
you look a great deal at history, while no one can tell the future. Machine learning takes in. I've got to assume you're taking in all the current events. You're going through all the things that are in process as they're happening and weighing it against the past. Is that
Well,
fair?
well, Ron, the system runs every night, and it takes about 7 hours for the whole system to run. It starts with the beginning of our historical database, which is about 1995, and it runs to the present day. And so it essentially runs on the entire database every night. And so every day it relearns, and there's a there's a new assessment every 24 hours. So, it's almost a beautiful thing in that, in the 7 hours when we run, it's doing about 10 to 20,000 calculations per second. And so the total calculations over the 7 hours, it's in the hundreds of millions. It's a lot of data that is being run, um, and it just takes a long, long time to go through it. And that's the thing. Machine learning, it's really just an outboard motor, if you will, on a motorboat. And that outboard motor, depending on the surface of water you're dealing with, can be very useful. But it also can be useless if you're in some waves. But at the same time, you can't really do much else with it. Once you're out of the water, it's useless. And that's the situation with machine learning. It's like, I love to talk about Rain Man. It's a very kind of common example where people can kind of see the manifestation of what machine learning is, which is a very intelligent machine in a very specific niche category. And so you build this machine learning for some specific prediction, but it can do nothing else. It's essentially useless, when you move the aim a few degrees over, and it has absolutely no cognitive dissonance. So there's no clue what is going on. And when I say this at conferences, usually some professor will jump up and say, "Oh, but Google's two machine learning systems are able to talk to each other." And I said, that's all they found was an efficient mode of data transfer. Is that a language? Sure, but all language is an efficient mode of data transfer. So if you have two machines that are analyzing and transferring data, and that's all they do, they will analyze their data and they will transfer it to whatever ports are available to them. And they don't know why they're doing this. They don't know why they connected to the other computer. They just know there was a port. That port was available to it. And so it started transferring its data with that port. And so we're really dawn of the dawn. If it's New World style, Cortez has burned his sails, but we're hundreds of years from the Continental Congress. It's not. It's not anytime soon. You and I will be long dead before there's real intelligent artificial intelligence.
You have a deep love of history, I can tell, because you quote different periods. I do too, so I appreciate that. When we talk about machine learning, now you get into deep learning, and you and I spoke just a few minutes before starting the recording. Reinforcement. Go into that a little bit, if you would. Explain that.
Well, I think before we jump into reinforcement, we should kind of preface it with deep learning.
Mhm.
And that takes us to Jeopardy and Watson and just a few years before. Stanford professor Andrew Ngo, who's actually one of my personal idols, and one of the smartest AI minds on the planet, runs the computer science and AI departments for Stanford. And he actually has put up Stanford AI Intro 1 and Stanford Intro AI 2 on Coursera for free. And they are the two best introductory courses on artificial intelligence, and they are completely free. And so I highly recommend everyone should check them out. But what Professor Nagood did was he fed 4 million pictures of cats to his machine. And the machine was able to recognize what a picture of a cat was without any prior knowledge of cats. It was fed these pictures, and so it learned on its own. And that was the first time deep learning was proved on a public basis. However, many people believe that James Simons and Renaissance have been using forms of deep learning since as early as the late 70s. James Simons and Renaissance, they were born out of Bell Labs. And, for our younger viewers, the original, the baby bells were broken up from the Bell monopoly,
Thank you.
which I'm sure, half of our viewers have never heard of, but it used to control the telephone industry in America, and it had more money than God. And it had a research center called Bell Labs where the smartest people went. There's nothing like it today. There's really nothing like it today. Because yes, you have Facebook and you have Amazon, you have Google, and you've got these great research centers, and you've got the Allen Institute, but there's no one kind of juggernaut with just so much money that they buy all the smartest scientists. There's nothing like Bell Labs today. But Bell Labs was working on deep learning, I think, as early as the 70s. But then in 2012, Jeopardy let IBM come on with their Watson deep learning machine. Now, I'm actually a gigantic critic of the Watson deep learning, despite the fact that one of my close friends and board members, Harold Moss, built the security system for Watson. Harold is a brilliant guy, and actually moved on to run Akamai Security as well. And I couldn't be more proud of being friends with him, but I'm not knocking the security system of Watson. I'm knocking how IBM decided to sell the machine. What they did was, after it became famous on Jeopardy for being the two famous Jeopardy champions, it went to all these hospitals and they said, "Oh, give us all your data and we'll save you lots of money." And for the Mount Sinai's and the Langone Healths, they could afford, the 10, 20, $30 million contracts. But for many of these community hospitals who were so excited to jump on board, and they did, they spent a lot of their capital on this. And I've heard a lot of really horrible stories about hospitals who had to cut back on offerings because of the money they wasted on Watson. And to this day, Watson has actually not made one iota of performance for one hospital. And in fact, Vanguard's head of AI, who's another good buddy of mine, Edward Mitby, constantly talks about the fraud that was perpetuated by IBM with Watson. They didn't even know how to apply their machine learning. It was taken by salespeople and pushed in a manner that was totally unacceptable. So in terms of ethics, I think that was probably one of the more unethical situations I've seen in business. I wouldn't knock any of the actual machine learning engineers at IBM. They were brilliant guys. But to just take this machine learning and say it can just, so much of what I've been saying today, Ron, is how impossible it is for a machine learning system to be versatile. Once it's built for that specific, arena, it can't really do much else. And so, they built Watson to answer questions on Jeopardy, and it could jump into this gigantic ocean of data and retrieve the answer. I'm sure good for you on that. But the idea that you could transfer this machine to helping hospitals' efficiencies, it's almost Enron-esque. It reminds me of their, Blockbuster deal, where they were going to distribute Blockbuster movies on their pipelines, which was a fairy tale. But at the same time, IBM's, dealings with Watson hospitals was also a fairy tale. But with anything, with progress, you'll have mistakes. And I don't actually credit the scientists with that. I think that was more of a management and sales mistake from IBM. And when you get such a large situation as IBM, it's hard for the scientists and the engineers to have any say in what actually goes on. They're just cogs in the wheel, and their power stops at where it's granted.
If I can believe what I've read lately on Boeing's issue with the 737 MAX, it's pretty much the same scenario. You had engineers that ran Boeing for years, and then in the last few years, they brought in a CEO that didn't have the Boeing culture, didn't grow up in the Boeing family. Uh, it's pretty much the admin and maybe sales too, but certainly admin kind of took over, and they made the choice to go ahead with things that engineers would not have done.
Well, you're speaking to my heart here, Ron, because if you go to our website at rebellionresearch.com, you'll see I've been on TV a number of times discussing the 737 MAX issue. I've probably written half a dozen, academic research pieces on the 737 MAX. I deal with intelligent systems, and that was a great example of a flawed intelligent system. But the flaws were so simple and so pathetic. And I hate to use a word such as pathetic, but that's what the case was. Boeing wanted to sell, which they did, the safety mechanism. And so let's take a step back here, Ron. With automation, if you have managers dealing with technological innovations in the world of automation, these managers have to know how to work with these complicated machines. And with pilots, international pilots are nothing like US pilots. They have very little background. Some of them, they'll get first officers who have never flown a plane, have no idea what they're doing. I interviewed maybe 20 US legacy pilots who had flown internationally, the number of them for the Lion Air and the Ethiopian Air, and the horror stories I heard from these airlines were unbelievable. Never were they checked. Mechanics had no idea what they were doing. They would get first officers who didn't know anything whatsoever and were expected to be taught. And they would meet other pilots who could barely fly the plane. And so what happened was Boeing wanted an extra, I think it was $2 million for the safety switch. So if the MCAS wasn't working, the MCAS would shut off. But you don't need that safety switch. If you know how to fly the plane, you can just switch off the safety switch and fly the bird. Mm-hmm. But these pilots for Lion Air and Ethiopian Air were so unequipped to deal with the MCAS and the technologically savvy plane that they did not know how to turn off the MCAS system. The most pathetic part of the whole story was that, in fact, I believe the Lion airplane was going to crash the day before it did crash. But you remember Leonardo DiCaprio in Catch Me If You Can? He would sit in jump seat. Mm-hmm. They had a pilot sitting jump seat who was very experienced. And he said, "Hey, guys," and he turned off the autopilot and saved that plane. But the next morning, the two pilots didn't have an intelligent, seasoned veteran sitting jump seat. And so, plane's going up and down. What do we do? What do we do? I don't know what to do. You could just press the off button, but they literally were not trained on the off button. And here's something really scary. The closest 737 MAX simulator to these two countries, to Ethiopia, was Singapore. So you would have to go from Ethiopia to Singapore to take the MAX simulator. And with Lion Air, that was a very, 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 I don't say cheaply run operation, but it's a value carrier. They're not going to send any of their pilots, even though, Indonesia's fairly close to Singapore, they're still not going to fly their pilots for the simulator. They're just not going to do it. Mm-hmm. Plus, renting the simulator for an hour is very expensive. They don't want to do that. They just don't care. The safety standards are very poor. So you had a combination of a frugal, airline that didn't want to pay for the extra, but they shouldn't have had to. Boeing should have offered the safety switch for free. They should never have charged for it. That was an absolute mistake. And by the way, so much of the software that Boeing did was outsourced to Bangladeshi programmers at like $6 an hour. So that's not to say that there's a problem with the software. The truth is the software worked. The machine worked, but it also failed because the machine was built so that you had two. Do you remember in 2009 the Air France plane that crashed in South America? Mm-hmm. It had it had one sensor that froze up, and then the plane didn't know what speed it was going, and the pilots tried to override the plane, and they sent it into a stall. so with the MCAS, there are now two sensors. So there's improvement. But the problem is if one of the sensors is faulty, the system won't ignore the faulty sensor. And it's really simple code. As someone who's been building programs for decades, you can program in, if the data jumps by certain variance, ignore the data, because then the data might be flawed. It's called, swatting a bug before the bug occurs.
Mhm.
And here, Boeing didn't do that. And so, what happened with both the planes was that the maintenance didn't fix the sensors. One of the sensors gave bad information, it was doomed. And unless you had seasoned pilots, which they didn't, and nobody has outside of, Europe is still safe, but outside of Europe and the United States, I would not be comfortable flying anywhere. And I'm from a family of pilots. My father-in-law flew F-14s for the Israeli Army. My first cousin was a Delta senior pilot for 30 years. I was actually the largest shareholder of Great Lakes Airlines for many years. That was a personal investment. I was, actually my worst investment ever. I generally keep all my money in the AI. I'm not really an investor. I believe in diversification, and I believe that nobody knows anything about any specific stock. It's like Clooney says, it's the house always wins, and in the stock market, the house always wins. So I don't try to win on any specific stock. I just try to win in the aggregate, which is of course my business. But no, I was very disappointed with Boeing. Boeing's a great American company, and they weren't just haphazard. They were cheap. They made a lot of mistakes. It wasn't just one mistake is the sad part. They made a lot of mistakes. You can't sell $100 million sophisticated piece of machinery to people who don't know how to use it. And then if you're going to do it, not put in the fail safes. You just can't do that. It's really, you remember Hunt for Red October? It's like, sending out this fantastic nuclear submarine, but instead of Marco Ramius, the man who trained all the submarine captains, send out some junior guy who doesn't know what he's doing. And that's what happens all the time in Asia, by the way. The amount of unqualified pilots in Asia is frightening. It is a Wild West out there, let me tell you, the Wild West.
Wow. Well, you've mentioned what you do several times. The name of your company is Rebellion Research. Interesting name. If you would tell us how you named it, and tell us about the company, what you do, how you came about.
So when I started dealing with machine learning and AI, 99, 2000, 2001, it was still not a respected field. There had been several AI bubbles in the 90s and the 60s, and they had amounted to nothing, and AI really hadn't gone anywhere. And so, it wasn't respected. It was considered campy, almost, of a profession. But the chair of the math department at Amherst College believed in machine learning, and I believed in machine learning, and I loved working with her. And so I started working on a Amherst College funded research group. Myself, the chair of the Amherst Math Department. Boy went on to become one of Peter Thiel's machine learning guys. Peter Thiel's a Facebook founder. And we built k-means clustering algorithms for economic predictions. And I knew we was going to need machine learning, but then in doing that, I realized, not realized, but I proved that I needed machine learning. And so I roped in another partner, Spencer Greenberg, who was actually working for the NSA, developing smart document search technology. What I mean by that is his machine learning document search would look for an unknown terrorist. I don't remember if you remember Donald Rumsfeld had a term for the unknown unknowns. And so his machine learning would look for the unknown terrorists via known terrorists. And so terrorist, A and terrorist B are in the same soccer league. Unknown XY is in that soccer league. Terrorist C and terrorist D are in this apartment complex. The same unknown is in that apartment complex. All of a sudden, we have an unknown who has multiple associations with known knowns. And so that person becomes a potential subject on the NSA and the CIA's radar. And so Spencer was doing this. And I said, Spencer, you're making 26.5 a year, let's build some AI for economic predictions, make some money from it. Who knows? And I don't know if you remember Hank Greenberg, the baseball slugger from the 40s,
Sure.
but that was Spencer's grandfather. And so Spencer, always had the desire to do something big and do something big. And so, he agreed. And We got venture capital funding, actually from Bob Pittman, the former AOL Time Warner COO, MTV founder. He went on to, start. It was the pilot group Lear Hippo, venture capital firm that's done a number of big companies from Daily Candy, Thrillist, Huffington Post, Casper. So yeah. No, actually, Casper's a great company. I don't know if you've checked them out at all, but
I haven't, but I will now.
well, good mattresses. They are. Apparently, they lose money in every mattress they make, but that's also because apparently they spend half of what they make on marketing. But apparently, it's a scientifically proven great night's sleep. But yeah, no, I don't have any problem sleeping personally. I have a pretty old-fashioned, uninteresting mattress myself.
So you started out wanting, you were already into AI. You knew people that knew how to write for artificial intelligence, machine learning, and so you started this business. Which, by the way, for those folks out there that are listening, you're got a good chunk of the last part of Dark Pools. That's a book that I was telling you before we started. I read years ago when it first came out. I had no idea that I had read all about you years ago. Uh, don't have a memory that handles all that. So I find it fascinating. Uh, I guess the history of the business. So
No,
with
I'm
that,
obsessed with history. I was going to be a political speechwriter, but the problem was I was only ever good at mathematics. My father wrote speeches for Walter Mondale. He was. I wanted to follow in his footsteps and be a political speechwriter as well, but I've only ever been gifted at mathematics. I'm very poor with the written word and language, so sadly. But no, I mean, I love math, so I'm happy that this is. I love coming to work every day. I like to stress that. I hate missing work. It's I'm not a vacation guy. I get almost a little depressed. I love being in my office. It feels like mission control.
mhm,
Like Captain Kirk in his chair. I
yeah,
feel, I can accomplish things there. Be it, I have this academic research publication that I had 100. So we had a record readership in January, 100,000 unique readers. It's about 80% US, but we're starting to get some international readers. And it's mostly AI, but we'll do things from Fukushima to black holes, and I get a lot of guest articles from a lot of other professors and scientists. And Peter Cook actually wrote one of the best-selling machine learning textbooks in the country. I got him to write a guest piece, and we've done interviews with fun people like the inventor of Amazon's Alexa and General Petraeus and astronaut Scott Kelly. But the real aim, though, is just to educate the world on, the changing planet, if you will. And so we'll even do some, geo stuff, pollution. I'm a little, I have a soft spot for the environment. So I do like to cover that. I think that environment is very much about our future. And so I think that, you can cover AI and then go from AI to the rainforest, the next day. I think they go hand in hand, quite frankly.
well, I'm enjoying it. You've been sending it to me for about a week now, and I love them.
Did you see our
It's
piece
and
last night?
pardon.
Did you see? We came out with a piece last night on XRP, the alternative currency, XRP, and how they bought a controlling stake in MoneyGram. And this was actually very interesting. I had a meeting with these really awesome Spanish engineers who are building machine learning systems in Barcelona. And you know, you know, at Rebellion, we do a lot of research and development, but because we become an established player, a lot of up and coming scientists will come to us. Plus, I told you I had 51 graduate and undergraduate interns last year, so I work with a lot of very aggressive students. But I had these two engineers from Barcelona in the office yesterday, and they were telling me all about how XRP is going to turn MoneyGram into a drug smuggling superhighway, if you will. And that, because you have to realize that MoneyGram, now that they're going to be using this, Bitcoin equivalent XRP, drug dealer one can open, a 15-digit anonymous, account in Mexico, and drug dealer two can open his anonymous account in Oklahoma City, and they can jump on. And the great thing for MoneyGram is that by trading in this alternate currency, they have U.S. as a jurisdiction, because, the U.S. only has jurisdiction over U.S. dollars, the way Mexico only has jurisdiction over the peso. And so U.S. has a jurisdiction over two nefarious people, selling a presumptual computerized value. There's no jurisdiction there. And so really what's happened is MoneyGram and Ripple Labs, the XRP developers, have created what will become one of the biggest nefarious highways out there. So one of the, at Rebellion, we actually just brought, Interpol.
Mm-hmm.
We brought in a former engineer from Interpol, and it's been really enlightening. We're looking into developing some cybersecurity software, and we've been talking with the government about doing some research and getting a grant. And so, to focus on this, I brought in this absolutely brilliant Interpol guy, and he's going to spearhead this venture for us. We've really just gotten, we've been covering cybersecurity a lot in our research, and a lot of our AI work lends to it. And so, I think it's a natural branch for our firm to grow. And so I'm excited about it. At the very least, it'll be interesting, and I'll learn. And it's, I love finance, but it's nice to do unrelated things.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Without a doubt.
excellent. Let me pause here for just a quick identification. Folks, you're listening to the Information Playground. I'm Ron Bush. I underwrite the program, and we come to you on radio, podcast, and YouTube. So look for the Information Playground on any of those platforms. You can find me if you want to take a look at my website, ronbushconsulting.com. Our guest is Alexander Fleiss. Take a look at his website, rebellionresearch.com. It is a great website, great research. I can't tell you how excited I am about what you're doing. I read a book last year sometime on the history of Bitcoin. And of course, the history of Bitcoin's been plagued with, the Silk Road and all the different drug deals and everything else. Well, drug dealers use currency when they they've been using that for years, just dollars, pesos, whatever country they happen to be in. I don't know that needs to turn us off. When I listened to and read some of the interviews with Mark Zuckerberg before Congress, which is another story. I got to stop and say, when a congressman says, and this didn't happen the last round, but the round before, when a congressman stops and says to Mark Zuckerberg, "Sir, how do you make money?" I mean, that tells me he has no concept of Facebook, how it works, or anything else in this.
The framers of the Constitution didn't expect Congress to be filled with the smartest people. They expected Congress to be, I hate to quote my favorite Latin teacher, but, the common people aren't the most educated people. And they expected it to be very much a House of Commons, if you will. And the senators would be the more, intellectually savvy, working as a check on the House. And the House would be more of the impetuous adolescent, and the Senate would be more of the wiser, slower, calmer adult.
Yeah, they were wise men, the founders.
I'll tell you this. I got to stop you, Ron. The founders were probably one of the most amazing groups of super geniuses ever to come together to do anything in the history of the planet. I am someone who is just fascinated by intellect. My best friends include Yale law professors, inventors of Google DeepMind, endless amounts of machine learning engineers. I work very hard to spend my time with super smart people. My own father has 2 PhDs. He gave up his poli-sci PhD to become a spinal surgeon. So he has a PhD also in spinal surgery from Columbia after his NYU PhD in political science. I love to bring education to light, but the founders of this country were so impressively, psychotically brilliant. I couldn't hold a candle to any of them. Alexander Hamilton was next level intelligence.
Hmm.
Benjamin Franklin, next level intelligence. And then George Washington's humility was
Hmm.
something but humility mixed with reason and rational thinking was just awesome, really just awesome. And even Thomas Jefferson, the laissez-faire, lazy, French loving one, he was still fantastically brilliant, knew how to work with others. you know, America, one of the reasons America is so great is we were very lucky that we had these amazing, psychotically brilliant people come together at one time to make such a fantastic country. We're very lucky to live here. It's really, I feel very blessed to be in this country every single day.
Well, I couldn't agree more, and I'm glad that you said it. Very well said. So let's switch gears a little bit. We can't talk about all of this without the speed to allow for the data transfer that has to happen. So 5G. What is 5G? Where is it today? When will it be where they tell us it's going to be? And what will it do for us?
Well, first, 5G is more exciting, I think, than any other technology in the short term future. In the next 5 years, 5G will influence society on a greater scale. I don't think than any other technology. Of course, one man's opinion is worthless. But I always say, you had your third generation technology, around 2000, which, brought AOL and Netscape. And then you had your fourth generation wireless technology around 2010, which brought the ability for apps. And you could have something called Uber. And so with the fifth generation of wireless technology, what dreams may come, yet we can't even imagine. We don't even know the $100 billion ideas that will be available due to this technology. So what it really is the ability to transfer a lot of data. So if you want to get literal for our non-technologically savvy viewers,
Mhm.
I so my buddy runs the wireless department at NYU, and he says the best way to explain 5G versus 4G is in a movie download. Today, if you want to download, Lincoln or The Right Stuff, long movies like that will take you up to maybe even 3-4 minutes, depending on your Lincoln. With, once 5G is 100%, 2 seconds, 2.5 seconds. We're talking about 100 to up to 200 times the amount of data can be transferred per wave. And so, these waves that carry the data, they can just bring a lot more stuff a lot more quickly. And so it's much more localized. So we need many more of these, 5G machines throwing out the 5G signal, because the signals, they don't go very far, but they carry a lot more data, if you will. And so you'll need a 5G emitter really every, 10 to 5 to 10 to 15 yards. We're going, to need a lot, uh, quite frankly. But it'll be done. It'll be done quickly. And it will be very exciting. Flying cars, who knows if I'm right, but flying cars is probably going to come about in the next few years. Uber has really spearheaded this, because with 5G you can control a car. When I say flying cars, they'll put the drone rotors on it, and it'll essentially be a large drone, and it will be controlled on a network with edge computing, which we can get to in a second. And this drone will be able to be controlled within 1 to 2 centimeters, and it won't go very high up. It's not, but the point is, it'll be completely automated, and it will be extremely specific. We're talking not inches, centimeters with 5G. And so safety should increase gigantically. And, driverless auto, it's still, I wouldn't be surprised if flying cars came before driverless auto, actually, because the problem with driverless auto is you have to deal with driving. drivers, and flying cars don't have to deal with flying with human beings. And so that's the biggest problem with autonomous driving. Well,
You
actually, there
heard
are two
about
gigantic problems.
I have to stop you there. You heard,
No.
just to make your point, you may have heard about, I think it was in Phoenix last night or the night before. They arrested a man who had pulled out in front. He was a disgruntled employee, ex-employee from Wemo, and he pulled in front of a driverless truck and intentionally had pulled over just in time to have the truck hit him. So now he's the casualty of a driverless truck having run into him, but it was his fault. And of course, they have video of the whole thing. So it's not going to stand up in court, and most likely they'll file charges against him. But that's exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Not with people intentionally getting hit, but just human error, where
Mm.
you don't have that with
But
the
there's
machine.
also going to be the moral questions. Does the driverless technology kill 2 people or kill 6 people?
Yeah, yeah.
It can make a left turn or a right turn. Both turns will result in fatalities. And so you got that issue. But
That's an ethics question that nobody's, I mean, some are wrestling with it, not a lot, but some are. They have been, I've been reading about it for the last year. A human doesn't know how to make that decision. They just make the one that comes most naturally. How do you program a machine to do that?
yeah, no, it's very, very difficult. And that's why a large drone that hovers, that has no human beings to deal with, and that flies in its open airspace,
Mhm.
is much. Machine learning works better in a vacuum. The fewer, the more consistent the database, the more consistent the environment. And by the way, the environment can be extraordinarily complex, millions of planes. But as long as those millions of planes are consistent in their movements, the machine learning will thrive. Machine learning has more and more trouble when the environment becomes less and less of a vacuum.
Mhm.
And so that's the problem with driverless cars. You've got so many, variables that are going to come into play that make it difficult. But I still think we'll get there in the next few years. And, it'll be great. Well, no more driver's insurance, because, the accidents are going to plummet, 99%. And speaking of 5G, phones are going to be able to last so much longer, because so much of our, phone space is taken up by the battery. But we'll be able to give even more space to the battery, because with 5G, we won't need as much hardware devoted to holding on to the data. And
Mhm.
so, with edge computing, all of this gigantic amounts, so edge is localized cloud, and it will allow for, Verizon to know about a few city blocks and not have to have their entire, state's database for just a few city blocks. The idea being it's like a local cluster for a cloud. But yeah, edge computing is very, very, very exciting. It really is. I think edge computing will probably be a buzzword that you hear about a lot with 5G. Just a lot, a lot, a lot, a lot. The cloud is slower, it's clunkier. The cloud was amazing 10 years ago, but now
Mhm.
the latency, it's too slow now. And so if you need to get that data very quickly, and with flying cars you do. And so a flying car can't rely on a cloud that's being stored in Northern California. It needs the data immediately. And so that's why it'll use edge computing, which will have its localized data for its city or its town, and the latency will be much more efficient.
I'm hearing a lot about edge computing in areas like Indiana. In fact, Indiana seems to be doing a lot in AI. I mentioned edge computing, cybersecurity. Um, I'm not sure why it's the middle of the country. They call it the crossroads of America, but that's because the interstates cross there. Um,
I
Actually, the
stop.
intersection of Interstate 65 and 94, and there's another interstate there, is the heaviest traveled interstate in the whole country, or intersection in the whole country, um, every day.
Yeah.
Now you've got that with I guess our infrastructure. Um, I'm not sure where I'm going with that,
Well, I'll
but it,
stop you. I think so. So we wrote a piece last fall on AI in Indiana, and we took notice at rebellionresearch.com of the fantastic, the hotbed of activity that is the state of Indiana right now with technology. And I think it's simpler than that. I'm a very simple type of guy. I always think people try to make things too complicated. Occam's razor is one of my favorites. For me, it's Indiana engineering. You've got a world-class, gigantic engineering school in an area that is not too expensive to live in. It's not terrible San Francisco and terrible Manhattan. So, you can get a great degree and you can stay and live there and create and innovate. It's the same reason why Pittsburgh has been flourishing, because Pittsburgh is very affordable and has Carnegie Mellon students who are like, hey, stick around here.
Mhm.
And so with great schools comes great students, and with great students comes great innovation. And so, yeah, I think it's probably number one is Indiana engineering, and then obviously Indiana is a great place to live, and it's close to Chicago, so you've got a lot of positives there. But
Great.
tech is flourishing all over the country. I'll tell you that too, as well. It really is. This is like, I mentioned to you that we had two AI bubbles that failed. A big one in the 60s failed, a big one in the 90s failed. What I mean by it failed is there's a lot of media hype, a lot of corporate innovation, and then there was no profit. This is America. We're capitalists. Where's the profit at the end of the day? And now there is profit, whether it's Rebellion Research making profit by managing, brokerage accounts in 41 countries around the world, or Facebook using AI, or Google using AI. But the fact is, you've got companies in every industry all over the world that are making serious profits. And with those profits, they're reinvesting in AI. And so we've crossed the inflection point, Ron. There's no more going back. This is not going to be a bubble. There have been so much money made in AI. It's all being reinvested. Plus, when you look at the tech leaders of today, from the Microsoft CEO to Zuck, to the Larry Ellisons, to Elon Musk, there is not a one of them that is not investing wholeheartedly in AI and machine learning as much as possible. Apple's buying stupid AI companies that do nothing. Good. They made some of my friends a lot of money, but my friends were like, great. We hadn't built anything that worked yet, but listen, when you're Apple and you make $100 billion a year, just buy it.
Yeah.
Why
Yeah.
not? I don't know if you remember that fun Tim Robbins movie from the late 90s, Antitrust, where he plays this kind of evil Bill Gates. Oh,
Yeah.
it's very silly. It's almost too silly for words, but I feel like Apple's becoming like a real life version of that. Just anything that comes near, they just buy it. They buy it. They buy it. Ask questions later, buy it first.
Right.
Who cares? The money's flowing, and they don't want to miss any technology.
Yeah.
Tim Cook, for his credit, is scared to death of missing out. He's just scared to death of missing out because he, grew up under the tutelage of Steve, and Steve was always like obsessed with missing out on the next new thing. And that's why he hung out at all. Remember, he met Wozniak at the computer meetup place.
Right. Right.
Steve was just trying to be on the front, on the ground of what was going on with the smartest people and know, which is the same reason why I teach. It's for no other reason than to be on the ground floor with the smartest minds and the newest, most aggressive ideas that are out there. And so, Tim Cook has the same mentality. Just, I don't want to miss anything. I don't want to miss anything. And, that's great because, arrogance is the worst thing on the planet and gets you absolutely nowhere.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Pride really does go before the fall. Uh, I guess I'd be remiss with my field in cybersecurity if I didn't mention that I think it was 2015 or 16, Apple, Google, Microsoft, you name it, all the major technology companies all bought Israeli cybersecurity companies.
Israel is, we have probably written a half a dozen pieces on Israel's cybersecurity industry. It's just amazing. But, let's be honest. Why is it so amazing? It's a country that's constantly under attack
Mm-hmm.
from all sides. It's also, the Jewish people are the most prone towards education and high education. Not to say that the Jewish people aren't the smartest people, but Jewish people, like, first, many of my friends are from India and from China, because India and China are two cultures that are obsessed with education. And I'm obsessed with education. And I think that's part of why China's done very well and why India continues to do very well. India has their own, issues with, growing their country, and, it's tough, but you've got societies that are very obsessed with education, and that's very important. And Israel's so obsessed with education. And cybersecurity, their cybersecurity industry is unbelievable. It's really, there are something like 500 funded operating cybersecurity companies in Israel today. This is a country of 8 million people, smaller than New Jersey.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, it's remarkable.
Yeah, I read a couple of your articles on it and enjoyed them. I also, one of them mentioned CyberTech. And I think I mentioned to you before, CyberTech is an Israeli cybersecurity conference, I guess, for lack of a better term. They just had two of them now, 2 years running in Indianapolis of all places. And it's the very same people. Governor Holcomb went over there and talked to him about it, what they were doing. He has a great interest in cybersecurity. And I'm still on their board, even though I don't live in Indiana anymore. Just I'm just amazed at all that's going on in that area. We've got a little over 5 minutes, and I want to give you a chance. I always do. Is there something we should have mentioned, something we should have talked about? Last thoughts? You guide us from here on out. If you anything that you wish I'd asked or we'd covered, let's
Well,
go for it.
something I like to talk about is, I think colleges are totally, going to become a thing of, I mean, I'm someone who went to Amherst College, a very old school, elitist New England institution. But was that necessary? Was it necessary for me to go to Amherst for 4 years? I'll hire a 17-year-old kid who can program just as well as a 22-year-old with a degree from USC. What do I care? I'm not going to push the anti-college thing the way Peter Thiel does, but we're living in a society now where you don't need college to get a great job. You can do programming for a few months. It doesn't have to be programming, but you can learn so much online. And cybersecurity, you don't need to go to college for cybersecurity. You absolutely do not. And by the way, quickly with cybersecurity, I think that's probably going to be the growth industry of the next foreseeable future. Forget healthcare. I mean, healthcare will grow, but as we stop procreating, we're going to have fewer people, and healthcare will slow because we'll have fewer people to take care of. But cybersecurity, everybody wants to pay for security, and the money will just continue to flow into cybersecurity. That's probably just the growth industry of the next century. Really, that's I recommend anyone who wants to make money to go into cybersecurity.
Everything that I read now tells me there's 3 million positions going wanting because they don't have people to fill them. And
That's
and
the
I couldn't
problem.
agree
Of
more.
course, that's what I
Go
hear
ahead.
from everybody. They just can't fill the roles right now. Listen, if you want a job in America, it's a question of sloth. Do you want to work? Do you want to train yourself? And you don't need access to the library in Alexandria to get a fantastic job in cybersecurity. You need a free computer at a local library, and you can learn so much. And so, no, I don't love these colleges that charge so much money. It seems to be, it's a nice place to grow up, I guess, and to spend some time and to get to know yourself. But for those who can't afford college, don't let that inability daunt you in any way or suppress you. I think college is quite overrated and becoming more and more overrated as we advance. And I think the most important thing from today is that machine learning will make more jobs. I have faith that history will be the greatest use for predicting the future. And in the annals of history, we have consistently had technology and innovation provide us with higher paying jobs in better conditions that take fewer hours. It's consistently moved that direction. So you can work less, make more, lose fewer fingers, I mean, the idea of sabotage, the word sabotage comes from the Chinese workers who were so angry with their conditions, they took their sabo shoes and they threw them into the mill. And that's where the word sabotage came from.
Hmm.
And that's so much of the world is based on how much you hate your job. And with AI and machine learning, the lowest members of the business and workforce will have more comfortable, better paying jobs, and it's just going to be a better society for everyone.
I
So the
couldn't
people
agree
who are
more.
scared of losing jobs, they're wrong. There are going to be many more jobs. Think of Zoom, what we're on right now. This is something that's created billions of value, thousands of jobs, a Chinese immigrant who spoke no English. Thank God we have 4G technology, which allowed for Zoom to come about. So
Mm-hmm.
my point is that, I don't like Bernie Sanders. I'm a libertarian. I'm no Republican or Democrat. Civil liberties, do unto others as they would have done unto you. That is my guise in life. I want everyone to maximize their happiness. But wealth is created. Zoom is created. The jobs that Zoom offers are created. The wealth that the Zoom employees made from the IPO, that's created. And that's what technology has done. It's allowed people to create and innovate and build things that they wouldn't have otherwise. The Zoom founder was a broke immigrant, no English skills whatsoever. And you tell me this is not the land of opportunity? No, this is the land of opportunity.
Well, I could not agree more. I didn't know that about Zoom, even though I use Zoom. So thank you for that. I've got a good friend, Atso Sikorsky. He's the chancellor for the Porter County and LaPorte County in Indiana of the community college there. Ivy Tech is the largest community college in the country. And he's got all kinds of opportunities for people to learn, to get stackable credentials, to get better educated. They've worked out where you can actually pay nothing for your associate's degree or your first 2 years of college, and then transfer all those credits to any university in Indiana free. You've gotten the first 2 years free. There is no reason why anyone today, other than, I guess, desire or personal issues, can't get educated. And as you say, cybersecurity, anything when you're dealing with technology, AI, robotics, machine learning, all these frontiers that we've got right in front of us. There's no reason why we can't do better than what we are. So with that, I want to thank you for being on today.
Oh, my pleasure.
Well, you've been great to talk to and to listen to, and I hope we can do this again.
Pleasure was all mine. Thank you, Ron.
Thank
Have a
you.
wonderful weekend.
Thank you. You too. Everyone, you've been listening to the Information Playground. I'm Ron Bush with Ron Bush Consulting, and we come to you through a variety of means. WVLP FM in Indiana. You can stream from WVLP.org. We come to you on different podcast platforms as well as YouTube. So please look for us, and thank you for listening today. Our guest has been Alexander Fleiss with Rebellion Research, and do check out his website, rebellionresearch.com. Thank you.